Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Drapers Connects. My name is Graeme Moran, and I'm the Associate Editor here at Drapers. Drapers Connects is our series of content that aims to bring together the fashion industry to talk about today's key topics, key challenges, and key opportunities. This is through Q&A discussions, panel talks, and webinars such as this. So thank you all for joining us. As well as our live series of webinars, you can also access the archive of all our past recordings online at drapersonline.com. Today, in partnership with AB Tasty, we'll be discussing how experimentation can transform your e-commerce site with the power of AB testing. We have a panel of experts here today, so thank you to the three of you for joining. Please take a moment to introduce yourself. Jo, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jo. I'm the Conversion Rate Optimisation Manager at Russell & Bromley. I'm part of the trade team at Russell & Bromley and look after everything on-site optimisation. For any of you that don't know, Russell & Bromley is a luxury footwear and accessories brand for the everyday. We were actually founded by the Bromleys in 1880, and it still remains owned by the Bromley family. And we currently have 36 stores across the UK and Ireland.
Perfect. Thank you, Jo. Matt, over to you.
Lovely. Hi, everyone. I'm Matt. I'm a digital data analyst at Belstaff. I've been here about 18 months now, and I can cover everything from experimentation, A/B testing / A/B testing as well, and anything around digital data, such as like GA, BigQuery, that sort of thing. So Belstaff has been around for 100 years now. So thankfully, we managed to celebrate our 100-year campaign this year. So really, really good. So not many brands get to celebrate 100 years. So we had a huge campaign this year, which is great. And we kind of focus more on the kind of luxury lifestyle / motor brands as well. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Matt. Joanna, over to you. Please introduce yourself, and why don't you tell our audience a little about AB Tasty?
Thank you, Graeme. And yes, hello, everybody. My name's John. I'm the marketing manager from AB Tasty. We're really pleased to be here with Drapers. We've done different things with Drapers in the past, and we work with lots of fashion e-commerce. Two of our customers, which we're really happy to have, is Russell & Bromley and Belstaff, which is, as both Jo and Matt just said, a sort of heritage British brands. So it's kind of interesting to have them both together today. AB Tasty itself is a digital experience optimization platform, which basically means we definitely do A/B testing and experimentation, which we're going to talk a lot about today, but we hit every part of what is digital experience or a digital customer journey, whether that's personalization, whether that's recommendations, whether that's experimentation, or whether that's emotional marketing.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Now, to our audience, if you are watching live, please feel free to send in any relevant A/B testing questions, and we will put them to the panel throughout or at the end. We'll do our best to cover as many as possible. Right, let's get started with today's discussion. Obviously, as you've all seen from the title and from our introduction, we're here to talk about optimizing through experimentation, and specifically A/B testing. Now, I like to start these conversations with some context and some basics. So I'm sure many of you do know, but I'm going to start with what is A/B testing and how does that work in today's digital world? John, why don't you take that question?
Yeah, thank you, Graeme. So I'm going to start very, very simply and then sort of lead up to what it could become. But A/B testing itself is literally a way of being able to test out a change on your website and how effective that change is in terms of what you want to achieve, right? So it's called A/B testing. There are other kinds of testing like multivariate testing where you're testing more than one thing or more than one page. But experimentation can involve lots of different things in fashion e-commerce, and I hope we're going to get into lots of those different areas today. But I'll start kind of simple and get more complex. So what it can involve, it could involve something like testing. I mean, the classic is testing a button color change on your product that's going to say buy now, and to see how effective the change of color is. But it could also involve testing copy, testing social proof, testing your image carousels, testing what customers are shown when they purchase. And then you can go even further to experimenting with your checkout process and so on and so forth. One major thing to point out, and we will probably discuss this as well as we get into it, is that a lot of people who don't know about experimentation or A/B testing is that they don't realize that lots of tests don't actually win. So, you're looking at even something like 8 out of 10 tests will be flat or will actually fail. And I think that's really interesting for anybody who's not in this world, because it's basically telling you that if you are making changes on your website without any data behind it, or without any way of being able to tell how that affects your audience, you can be making some massive errors. So again, A/B Tasty as a company embraces failure because there are actually lessons that failure teaches us. And we embrace change, and we embrace kind of continuous learning. And what I mean by continuous learning is even a failed test can give you ideas as to where you can improve or where you need to move the dial, if you like. And a successful test, you can also reiterate and replace throughout your website. So it's not like one massive change makes a massive difference. A lot of what we do, and I think a lot of what Matt and Joe are going to talk about, is this idea of continuous learning or continuous iteration. Just to kind of put in some context as well for people who don't know A/B Tasty itself, just in terms of some of the fashion brands we do work with, we work with M Brand Group, who've got lots of different sites under their group. Boohoo, the same. We work with Ganni, we work with Saint Laurent, we work with Balenciaga, we work with Calvin Klein. So we have a lot of experience within the fashion world. And we do more than just testing, as I said before. We help our customers at every touch point of the customer journey. And again, we're going to hit different parts of the customer journey today. So we're all about improving your website experience, which is for your customers. It could be for conversions, it could be for ROI, but it's also in order to create the best digital experience that you can.
Thank you, John. Now, we titled this session Experiment to Innovate and Optimize. So again, setting a bit of context, I wanted to ask the panel what they consider an optimized website. What is the dream of your website? And why is this word that we're going to keep using, experimentation, why is having an experimentation mindset important when it comes to achieving that? Joe, why don't you start us off with that?
Yeah, sure. So in my view, an optimized website experience is one that holds the customer at forefront of the mind. So when looking at optimizing a customer journey, we typically take 3 key things, which would be personalization, brand identity, and accessibility. So when implementing all these things, experimentation is really important to us. So we aren't working on assumptions, and we can measure the successes of those tests that we're doing. And even if it is the smallest change, it's good to know whether that's a detriment to the website or we're seeing any incremental revenue from it.
Great, thank you. Matt, what about you? What is an optimized website to you, and how are you bringing this kind of mindset to Belstaff?
For me, I mean, there's several points to be fair, but I don't want to get too technical, but I think going to any website, what's more important to me or any other people as well is speed. I mean, there's nothing worse than a slow website. And then ultimately with A/B testing as well, because we are changing experiences for these people on a website, it's just important to make sure that it's fast. There's no unnecessary technical debt or that's on the website as well. So it's always making sure that we can really optimize with that. So we do regular testing, each week to make sure that everything on the site has got a purpose. It's there's nothing that's kind of dragging us down or anything like that. So we are quite on it when it comes to that, things like errors and just making sure that there's a consistent journey for everyone. And if there is like a small inconvenience for a customer sort of thing, we pretty much resolve that straight away. But ultimately, going on from that, I think what Joanna said about accessibility as well, we like to kind of keep things quite minimal. So if you go onto our website, it's quite minimalistic, and then I really emphasize like less is more. So there's a very simple category structure we've got on the website. It's kind of always updated, it's always optimized as well, and pretty much refreshed quite often too. So they're probably the main things. And obviously, you've got things like trust as well, a very easy checkout process. We use Shopify, but I'll probably expand more on that later about how our kind of technical stack is, because we use Shopify, but it's also headless too. So that's quite an important element that people might want to know more about. So I think, accessibility and speed, and of course, trust as well.
Do you think that speed, it's sort of, well, I don't know, is it speed at all costs? If you have something that you really want to feature on your website, but it's dragging you down, is there kind of no question it's gone because it affects the speed, or is there a balance to be found there?
No, I think there is definitely things you can work around. I mean, I really do emphasize the importance of the kind of Google Core Web Vitals. I mean, what their kind of framework about, for example, the developers, it's very meaningful work, and the stakeholders, it's entice growth. And of course, for the graphics and UX team, it's building great experiences, sort of thing. So all that kind of comes into play, especially when you're experimenting too. And then ultimately, it's like a dedicated kind of guideline what you do follow, and then the website becomes more optimized. But I think with speed, it's like, for example, if someone goes into the homepage, for example, even though it's like quite a low mixture of traffic, because the majority of people go onto Google through product ads, they go straight into PDP sort of thing, but then they might want to go to the homepage just to kind of like restart their journey. And I think if you've got content that's taking a while for it to load, or elements that are just that kind of jitting around sort of thing, the customer picks that up, and then they don't want to wait for it, they just want to continue with their journey. So I think it's just really important to kind of test those things out, and again, less is more. Just keep it really minimal, simple, but effective.
I mean, there are stats, Graeme, on particularly for mobile. If someone's going through from an ad onto a mobile site and it doesn't load, I think within 3 or 4 seconds you've got a massive drop off there. They won't even stay. So I mean, it's massively important to a lot of sites.
Definitely. Now, obviously, we're talking about optimizing your website. So I wanted to talk about some parts of the website that our audience could maybe focus on if they're on this journey. We're calling these website hotspots. John, why don't you again kick us off with some explanations of what is a hotspot, and how can you prioritize them?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we wanted to sort of create a framework of the most important kind of pages, or the areas you would test for certain, right? The areas that your people are coming onto, and you want to convert, or what you want to move them further. So I mean, we use the words hotspots. Be honest with you, we kind of made it up, and let's see whether it catches on. But we kind of thought about. Matt kind of hinted at this as well. So we thought about the homepage, because obviously traditionally the homepage is who you are as a brand. That's the beginning of the journey, or it used to be the beginning of the journey. We want to have a look at the product description page, because actually, as Matt just said, a lot of people now, because they're coming through Instagram, they're coming through Google Shopping, or wherever they're coming from, are going straight onto a product. And that's a massive challenge for different brands, because what they have to do is say who they are, show the product, show other products maybe. There's a lot of things that they have to do in a small amount of space. Again, in a kind of situation where someone says, "Oh, that looks interesting," go onto it, and they could maybe leave very quickly. So there's a lot of challenges on that page, which I think we're going to get into. And then there's the product listing page, which is called a PLP. I do apologize for people when we start to use all these abbreviations, which again, there are many choices of how you list different products. There are many choices of in what way you do that, how you show them, or ways of converting. I think Joe and Matt are going to talk about that as well. There's more. We could have spoken about search. We could have spoken about the checkout. We could have, but we have to limit it to a certain amount. So I think that's, again, as a sort of, for those people in here, as a kind of introduction to not just experimentation, but sort of best practice on optimizing your website. They're nice areas for us to talk about, especially on fashion e-commerce.
Okay. You mentioned the homepage, so I thought we'll start with that. Joe, what is Russell & Bromley's approach to their homepage, its homepage? And could you maybe give us an example of a recent test that you did on your homepage and maybe what the kind of the outcome or the result was?
Yeah, of course. So at Russell & Bromley, we have a very considered approach when it comes to our homepage. We always make sure that the key SMEs are involved in planning all the way through to testing. We've done numerous tests on the hero CTAs recently, one which focused on sending our customers to more curated pages, and one which was testing single and dual gendered CTAs on top of the hero. One of our recent campaigns has been solely men's focused, which meant that our hero was also focused just on men's product. And originally we had 2 CTAs, both linking through to men's categories. But actually women's is our highest sales mix category. So we all agreed that this could have been a bit of a risk. So we decided to have one men's CTA and one women's CTA. Even though there wasn't any women's product in the asset, it really outperformed the single gendered CTAs, and we saw quite a big uplift in conversion for the control versus the variant. So yeah, it uplifted by about 4.5%.
Great example, thank you. Matt, what about you at Belstaff? What is your approach to the homepage? You said less is more, but we want to hear more. And could you give us maybe an example of a recent test?
So more recent tests we've been doing is more around the kind of product recommendations engine that we use. So just testing kind of different segments and kind of conditions, what kind of serve these product recommendations. So it has been more around that we have been doing some tests on. So for example, for either bestsellers or viewed by recently viewed, or new in those sorts of categories where we're kind of testing that to different segment groups. I'd love to give you more context on that, but that's actually run by a colleague of mine, so he's probably got all the data from that. But other experiments that we've done is more kind of around those CTAs as well. Again, testing those out to different links, but ultimately one test that we have had the idea of doing, but it's quite daunting, because ultimately we are men's and a women's brand as well, but like majority of our sales is just going towards men. But we had the idea of if a customer or if a person comes into the website and they have a very high affinity towards men's products, in the history of them not looked at any women's products at all, then we were thinking of maybe kind of converting the homepage into a men's landing page. But then from a conversion aspect, it might do really, really well. It's something we are still toying with. But then again, it's the homepage could have just talk about our brand a lot, and upcoming collaborations we've got coming in as well. It's always quite a good safe point of call. But I have seen some websites in the past that will incorporate like a men's landing page as their homepage if there is a strong affinity to men's or women's products. But we do find that some female customers who come into our website, they will often buy gears for men because our women's sales mix is quite small compared to our men's. But that's probably one massive experiment we probably want to start looking into. More than likely for next year. Obviously, we won't do something as big as that for peak, and then we'll probably test it on one of our subdomains first, see how it resonates. But that's probably one thing that it's been back of our minds for best part a couple of months, sort of thing. But it's just kind of building that test up and then making sure it's consistent, it works right, it doesn't affect any of the journey as well. So that's probably what we have been focusing on.
And that, just to throw in, Graeme, that is a test that I know another customer has done with us, what Matt's explaining there, which is just basically that's what we'd call a personalization test, because it's basically if people have come into someone's site and looked through predominantly one gender clothing, what's going to happen is the next time they come to the homepage, it's only going to show them that gender. So and that's kind of a good personalization, an example of, again, where testing can help you segment your different audiences and be able to talk to your different audiences.
We've had an audience question, which is very early for me to bring this in, but I think it's an interesting one at this point. Somebody has asked, essentially, we talked about how a lot of these tests fail, and you're letting, okay, so we're not going to do that because they didn't like it. How do you ensure that you're not having a negative impact from all these tests that may all be going wrong? So you're kind of, what's the opposite of converting? You're not converting all these people, and you're like, great, we've learned all of this, but could you have maybe lost the sale there? Like, how do you manage? I'm guessing that, there's only a certain A and B people that go into that kind of thing. Does somebody want to take that and sort of explain how you're managing that?
Yeah, I'm happy to take it. So we monitor all our tests really carefully, and a shout out to the A/B Tasty tool. So it really helps us learn how much we're gaining and how much we're losing on a monthly basis due to our tests, which is something that we always report on. But I would just say monitor your tests really carefully. We check them multiple times a day just to make sure that nothing's going wrong. But yeah, just to make sure that we're really not losing any substantial amount of revenue. It could be there's a bug in the test which could be causing it, or they just generally don't like the experience. So yeah, it's all about monitoring session replays and just keeping an eye on those to the control and the variant to see where those differences are.
See, I've had quite a few conflicting statements with that. So I've seen quite a few of the Content Square events that happen in the CX circle, and one of the things that they did speak about is no peaking. So we've got an experiment running, and it's quite exciting. Like, okay, this test is going to be great. There's quite a few problems, but then if you're peaking it every day, sort of thing, obviously we don't want to lose money or anything like that, but then or hinder their journey. But then if you can constantly keep peaking the campaign, then like you might get a kind of false idea how the test is running. So that might be one of the things that I think what I do, I do tend to set quite a few alerts up, and then if there is something that's just not right or quite alien, we do have some real-time tracking as well across the whole site. So if the conversion does go down significantly, it's one of those things where I look at the test, and then make sure it's not that, and it could be something else. But yeah, I think there is quite a big emphasis on not peaking, just making sure the campaign's done. And after it's been that kind of like cycle of where it has been completed, then we kind of get there's that no kind of like dread or no confidence in the experiment sort of thing. So if that makes sense, that waffled a little bit there.
No, I did.
Maybe we need to test peaking and not peaking.
Yeah.
Let me just add into, just because I see this with a lot of different customers, is one thing we talk about at A/B Tasty a lot is creating a culture of experimentation in the sense that often the teams that Joe and Matt have been working in, there's got to be kind of an acknowledgement above of what they're doing, right? There needs to be a concept that they understand what experimentation is. A classic example of this is like, if you do want to improve your checkout, you could feasibly lose some money doing that, or you could gain some, and people need to have a buy-in that you're using data in order to improve it in the long run, right? So people need to understand that, again. I totally agree with the no peaking thing sometimes, because there does need to be statistical significance. There's many variants as to what can happen during a test. If you started a test on a Friday, you're going to get different traffic over Saturday, Sunday. All sorts of different things can happen as to why something's not working or something's working, and so on. And again, what often happens in some tests is it goes down, but if it does the full 2 weeks, it actually goes up. So you need to, there's lots of things to bear in mind. But again, I would bring us back to this idea of mitigating risk as well, because what you're actually able to do is go, oh wow, that's a really bad idea. We need to move our ideas over here, or okay, this works. What if we put it here and here and here and here? So it's in the long run, An experimentation mindset means that you're actually mitigating risks and stopping bad things from happening to your website, including conversion and your bottom line.
You mentioned that again. I'm taking ignoring my own questions and taking them from the audience. You mentioned that, John, 2 weeks. Is that the sort of standard time, or does this change?
So it's standard. It depends on what your traffic is, right? But there needs to be a certain amount of traffic for it to be statistically significant, and so it has to be consistent. And so yeah, those are kind of two important things. Which again, we tend to work with larger companies because they've got bigger traffic, and so it's again, if they're getting loads of traffic through, that some of their tests can be done a lot faster.
We had another question from the audience, but it does actually fit in perfectly to where I was going to go, and they've named it better than me, which is brand versus commerce. So my question was going to be, for example, from a branding point of view, certain images or elements may look better, may be more on brand, whether that's a big, beautiful editorial shoot or a video that slows your website down. And when testing, maybe simple, plain images on white backgrounds, or still life versus model, etc. You might end up doing these tests, and the right or the better, whatever your result is not really what the branding team want or the PR team want, or maybe even what you yourself want from a branding point of view. How do you balance those two? And as the person in the audience has said, do you always prioritize business over brand, or is there an argument for pushing brand more? I don't know. Joe, why don't you start us off with that? What's your take?
Yeah, sure. So with our homepage specifically, we work really closely with online merchandisers and creative teams. So we always do try and make sure that we do have the right balance between brand, messaging, and trade focuses. We've actually recently, excitingly, just got a new creative director called Daniel, and he's really honing on the personality of the brand and how we are proudly British. But that does come with also balancing those trade priorities. So typically the hero is focused on the main campaign, which is going out across all channels. And then the rest of the homepage still ties in with the campaign. However, we have more flexibility around pushing trade focuses. One of our A/B tests that we've recently done actually came out of a trade meeting. And there's always kind of been a debate around whether a close-up image of the products or more lifestyle shots are more impactful. So we did a test where we replaced the lifestyle shots with images that showed the product a lot closer up, showed a lot more detail, and it actually showed that the control won. So the wider lifestyle shots were more impactful than the close-up product shots, which kind of leads us to our homepage is an inspirational tool as well as a trading tool. But yeah, we had a higher conversion rate, a higher click-through rate, and session time was also higher when we had the lifestyle shots. And we just always aim to kind of be culturally relevant and have nods to British culture within our content, whether that be trade-driven shots or campaign.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Matt, same question to you. Would you rather have, a unique, interesting website that, surprises people, or are you going to go with what converts, what works, what makes it easier and simpler? What's your take?
Yeah, it's tricky because but thankfully our kind of ecom trade team, they work very closely with the brand team as well. So they talk literally every day, they kind of do share ideas, sort of thing. So they kind of will agree on what is the best asset to use. If it is if it is going to be around, for example, like a really important event, for example, or it might be Phoenix Day, then they will kind of work very closely with the brand team and the ecom team to choose something that's quite intuitive, very brand focused, but quite conversion, quite very kind of conversion driving as well as an asset. So it's good from that perspective. And then I'm kind of more of the kind of final person. Like if it is like a video, we have been testing quite a few video modules recently as well, or like kind of GIFs. So I'm kind of like the last point of call to make sure if it is uploaded, because sometimes it can be formatting issues or compressing issues where you want a very great high quality piece of content, but then sometimes at the cost of that, it might be quite heavy on the site. So we'll measure that sort of thing. If it is like dragging the site down, or if it is taking quite a while to load on like several different devices. I mean, sometimes you can throttle it as well, where you can test the website using different site speeds or network speeds, sorry, or kind of different different devices as well. Like you can there is that technology out there which you can use. But ultimately, it's for me. It's nice that the kind of trade team are quite commercial, that will work with brand teams sort of thing. So we have that kind of perfect mixture of of course brand, of course driving sales as well, which is great, and it's nice to see, to be fair.
I can imagine there's a few arguments between the creative side and the data-driven side. I was just thinking then of the team in our office putting the cover of the magazine together and arguing with what works and what doesn't. So I find this super interesting.
But I mean, essentially with all the reports that we do, sort of thing. So when we have a launch campaign, we'll do like a big deep dive on how it performed, and then but even both the kind of course the brand team and trade team, they'll always kind of like appreciate the data because it is proof end of the day, and there will take learnings from it, sort of thing. So let's say if we release like a campaign, but the imagery, or the shots work great, and then do they can resonate or get great engagement both on Content Square or through GA, then they kind of make some changes to that, or maybe just play around with the placements as well. But I think in the past we have got tons of like information where it's like it shows you, okay, this hero campaign image performed really well, got quite a few click-through rates, nice amount of views, but then the revenue side of things didn't generate a great amount. So then like we have all that kind of data backed up, sort of thing. So it's always active. It's not like kind of stored away, hidden away and forgotten about. It's just actively used for each campaign. So it's nice to see. Yeah.
Let's move on to the PDP, or the product detail page. As John mentioned a little earlier, this is sort of rising in prominence and importance with a lot of customers Googling a product, so leather jacket, let's say, for Belstaff, and coming through Google straight onto that product detail page, skipping the homepage of where you may traditionally land. So these are kind of growing in importance. Joe, how important are they to Russell and Bromley?
Yeah, they're incredibly important to us. It's where the majority of customers decide whether they're going to make their purchase or not. And it is essential in the customer journey to excite and inform all of our potential customers. And we really hope that it prompts them to buy. So that's why it's so important to us to have that as optimized as possible.
And I know you guys have been in the process of sort of reworking your PDP. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So we decided to focus on the PDP this year for a number of reasons. Firstly, the majority of our traffic arrive on our site by landing on a PDP. Secondly, we don't offer a quick buy on our PLPs. So for anyone that has an intent to purchase, they will need to visit a PDP at some point. And thirdly, we just saw potential for easy wins. So we had a look at our competitors, went to Baymar to have a look at the research there, used user testing, held focus groups, and also used Content Square to define a lot of pain points or potential areas of improvement. And we decided to, instead of looking at it as a page as a whole, we decided to look at each element of the PDP and test them separately. So for example, for imagery, we looked at the size of the image, whether it's a carousel or a scroll interaction. Do we need thumbnails, or is it a progress indicator sufficient? And then obviously looked at it for desktop versus mobile as well. So each of the tests that we've done for imagery has led us to as to how we will display the imagery in the new PDP format. And we use this approach for every section on the PDP. So including where it was best to show the price, what should our size buttons look like, what should they include in the size button, and how we should display like key features and our delivery info. We also looked into that priority of recommendation trays. So whether they should be surfaced further up the page, whether we should have exit links at the bottom of the PDP going to content or other PLPs and PDPs. So we just made sure that once we had tested all those ideas, we compiled them all together, made sure that it all adhered to accessibility standards, and then ran it through user testing again to see whether that was a PDP that would work for our customer. So that's kind of the process we're going through. We've also had sign off from the creative team. We always work really closely with them. So yeah, overall, it's been a really good experience on how to transform a big page like a PDP.
Excellent, thank you. Matt, what about Belstaff? What's your approach to testing and the PDP?
Yeah, so if you look at, if you go into our PDP, you'll see that it's very visual. There's lots of kind of benefits to the jackets, such as like the kind of filling of the jackets, the kind of key, of course, unique selling points. But when it comes to testing, it sounds, for what I found, what I like doing, which I kind of got a lot of value from, is like even the smallest iterations or changes that you do make, and you keep testing those changes over time, sort of thing, then you'll probably get the right balance. So, for example, it could be making either something very small, like making text a bit smaller, a bit bigger, or bolder, or changing the format of that, or changing wording around. Then I think over time, if you keep testing those changes, and over time, then you'll know what kind of preference are of the customer, how they react to it, and then when you are doing like a big site makeover or anything like that, then you can say, okay, well, this change here, it's been backed by data, it's passed every single test that we've run it on the past couple of months, and it should remain in place, sort of thing. Or we can do things like that. But I think ultimately as well, we've started to incorporate, again, it's quite a low effort, but a high reward, is the use of countdown timers for shipping. So this was something I was quite adamant to get on board, and it's very low effort. It almost sounds like it's quite lazy, but the impact of it is brilliant, because depending on what time your shipping locations close, or when they can stop filling, that sort of thing, then for example, ours might run from 1 a.m. until 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and then when that's live, can customers know that they can probably guarantee their order to arrive by next day. And it's a great conversion driver, and it's quite fairly simple to get set up. And of course, you can tweak it to your own brand, but I think that's a massive win for us. I mean, right now, because we are going through peak and we've had quite a big promotion go around, our warehouse is quite there's a massive backlog at the moment. So obviously, we can turn it off whenever we want, sort of thing. But it's just nice to have, things are starting to quieten down, or let's get the countdown timer back on. And it's a really great piece of content, in my opinion. And then it just drives the urgency with people. It's either the rest of the order will arrive next day, or they can expect this promotion to end very, very soon. So it's quite interactive as well. So it's great.
Excellent. Everybody needs to get a countdown timer around.
Yeah.
John, are you? I know you agree, but so I won't say that. What are you seeing with the other businesses that you work with? Is the PDP becoming almost like the new homepage?
Yeah, I mean, we did touch on it before. I think both Joe and Matt's examples are great examples, because there's it's sort of endless what you could actually be experimenting on in terms of what works or what doesn't work. Although again, I would be very interested whether certain audience, like whether on Belstaff, for example, Matt, if they're looking also at the quality of the product sometimes, and if you're pushing that, or that kind of because obviously your price point is at a certain place for some of the products on there. But it's the thing that's very striking about the product description page is, just as Joe said, is that when someone comes on, they're looking at the product. It's the point where they're deciding, right? But it's also the point where they're also depending on your brand, it's different perhaps with Russell and Bromley or Belstaff, but if they've come through an ad from somewhere else, they're not quite actually sure where they are. So you also kind of have to define who you are. And you kind of have to define, well, if you don't like this, you could also go here and have a look at this and have a look at that. So I think the biggest challenge, and I see this with a lot of other brands, is to have a very clear message, be strong and be bold, but also be able to give other options at the same time. And on mobile, I think that's even more challenging. I think what lots of people are managing to do is actually get, other recommendations below the actual initial PDP. But again, this can change depending on your brand, and it can depend on what kind of messages you want to put through. Just to point out that again, that can be tested, that can be dealt with data as opposed to gut feeling. And again, once you realize that it works, I mean, all of these companies, I'm probably sure all the viewers watching have multiple product pages. It can then be, reiterated in other places or reiterated on the top 200 products that you've got views on and so on to see what kind of effect it has there. So that's where it becomes interesting.
Thank you, John. We are running out of time, but another thing I wanted to touch on, we've talked about homepage and PDP. I wanted to touch on PLP, which is the product listing page, which is equally important in other ways, maybe. Joe, do you want to tell us about your approach to PLPs and any insights or advice you have there?
Yeah. So we're actually currently working on a bigger project around attribution, which will help with our filter experience. But in the meantime, we've been looking at the styling of the PLP and testing elements around that. So some of the things that we've focused on, for example, what hover image displays when you hover over a product, is it a close-up or is it a model shot, and what that transition is like going from first image to hover. We've also looked at some smaller changes that helped with accessibility. For example, left aligning the product imagery information on the PLP. So instead of being centered, it's now left align. And that actually lifted our conversion by just doing that by 3%. So that was a really big win, but a very small change. We're also currently looking into the styling of our filters and hopefully streamlining that design. So at the top of the page, we can surface more product above the fold.
I know this is possibly not off topic, but I'm always interested in why. Like, why does left align work better? What do you think there's a reason for that? Is it the way people scroll, or the way, where their eyes go? What do you think is or is there even an explanation behind some of these things?
One of the main reasons that we did the change is because our UX UI designer at Russell Bromley made a comment regarding the way that people read. So it is always left to right. Yeah. We also wanted it to look like it was more connected to the product above rather than it was just floating in the middle. So yeah, that was kind of where we went with it. And then we've got loads of research looking at like Baymard research and just accessibility standards that back up that change. So yeah, it was a really good small win for us.
Excellent. Matt, what about you and PLPs?
So we had a request come from the business. I think that there was kind of two sides to this, but like we ultimately used one experiment for it. In fact, there were two experiments actually. So the kind of first one, what we did was a request that came from the business. So it was a business problem about the cost of like kind of taking photos and shots, that sort of thing. And I didn't realize how expensive it was. I mean, obviously you have to take photos and you have to retouch them, and I didn't think it was like I didn't think it was the price of what it was, sort of thing. So ultimately, the kind of request was limiting the amount of product images, affect conversion or affect user engagement. So we ran that test where. So most of our products, excluding things like t-shirts and maybe jumpers as well, but more around jackets, there's around 8 images for those. There'll be model shots, and there'll be the kind of like ghost mannequin product shots that we have. So our experiment or the hypothesis was to reduce the amount of images, and then it'll have very little effect on conversion. And unfortunately, the experiment actually passed. So having 6 images versus 8 didn't really affect anything. But then they also run a separate test where we kind of compared the kind of product shots versus the model shots and see, okay, what do people prefer? And then we kind of ran this experiment for about between 3 and 5 weeks. But we found that, so we changed. So ultimately, when a user lands on PLP, the images are either model or the product. So the kind of product was the kind of control, and the model was the variation. And then we found that the model shots drove massive amounts of engagement and clicks. So they're going to PDPs a lot faster, which we thought, okay, this is brilliant. It's great to see this, but the kind of conversion value had dropped. So it was like, right, okay, it's getting people to products faster, but they aren't converting for some reason. So we kind of opted to go for where the money is. Of course, we reverted back to the control, but it was quite an interesting experiment. But what it allowed us to do was to, when we do have these kind of photo shots taken, we have a bit more kind of like understanding of what kind of users want and what they want to see. So we're kind of trying to kind of merge the kind of model images with the kind of product shots, but maybe add more details onto the product imagery and that sort of thing. So it's quite a compelling test, to be fair, but it really shocks with some of the learnings that we had that the click-through rate is massive for model, but the conversion just wasn't quite there. So we kind of plan to do some video shots for next year as well, and also just try and maybe change around some of the imagery too when we have it shot, and just go from there, sort of thing. So obviously, it's always like a learning process. So this decision or this experiment that we ran is not the of course the end all, but it kind of gives us a bit more a bit more kind of background before we kind of redo the test in the future as well. So probably when we go with a new agency and do our photo shots, we'll probably want to retest it there as well. So, but again, quite compelling.
Now we are speeding out of time, but one last hotspot I did want to touch on, and I know we've had a question from the audience about this too, is search. And obviously there's 2 sides to this. There's where search is, how it looks, but then also how search works. John, how important are people searching? Is there any trends within this that we want to talk about?
Yeah, I think search is super important, and because one of the things, I mean, we conducted a survey earlier in the year, like at the beginning of 2024, and we said, we asked people, where do you begin searching for a product? And of course, lots of people said Google, but the second most popular answer was actually a brand's website. If someone's searching on your website for a product, it means they already trust your brand. It's sort of an extraordinary thing to say, I know where I'll get this. I'll go on to blah, blah, blah. What is very, very, very difficult to get right is how well your search works, what it shows afterwards, whether it shows things close to the thing that somebody was looking at, or there's many different ways you can do the algorithm. And then again, I would say this is slightly more on mobile, but how search looks, where it is, and the way that it displays is also quite complex to get right. And we have many customers who've done different testings on that in order to get it right. So what the worrying thing here, and this is the demitigating risk part again, is if they love you and they've said, I'm going to go on your website to find this thing that I want to get, and they can't find it at all, they'll quickly leave, but they also might remember, I won't go and check out that again. So when you've got it right, you're onto brand loyalty, you're onto customer lifetime value, and all those things that, again, everybody in this business knows are the things that actually keep an fashion e-commerce website going, which is returning customers and people who love your brand.
Thank you, John. Joanna, I keep calling you Joanna and Matthew, sorry. Could you tell us a bit about how you've tackled or been experimenting with search?
Yeah, so we've recently rolled out a change in our search on desktop, whereas previously when you used our search bar, the results would take up the whole screen above the fold. So recently changed that to appear down the right-hand side of the site so that customers still have visibility of the page that they're on. This was obviously as a result of a winning test. So we tested that and it worked really well. Search is actually one of our highest converting functions on site. So it is really important to us to make sure that it's as convenient for the customer as possible to get to. So we're actually currently testing at the moment on mobile search bar placement. And so we're really looking forward to deep diving into those results. Yeah, at the moment, we've already tested it being permanently below the header on mobile, and at the moment we're testing it being within the navigation on mobile, so it's easy for the customers to see. In terms of functionality, we currently do have quite a basic functionality of search on site. We don't do any like category recommendations. It's quite difficult for us just because if you type in black boots, you're obviously going to get men's and women's. So we definitely, it's something that we want to work on and make that a little bit more personalized for the customer.
Interesting. Thank you, Jo. Now going to try and cover some audience questions. So let's see how we go. There's been a couple around, which I quite like this angle of question around, is there anything that you've done recently that surprised you that maybe you weren't expecting, or you gave something a go and it caused a lot of debate in the office or anything like that? Matt, why don't we start with you on that one?
Sorry, I was looking for the QA question. Could you just repeat that, please?
Yeah, so just if there's any test you did recently that, did really, really well, or surprised you, or flopped when you thought it was going to be quite obvious, or caused some debate in the office. Anything of note, just to give another example to the audience?
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, it was more around the kind of the most compelling test that we ran this year was the model ones with the imagery. So that's probably the most one that kind of shocked us. But we also kind of know that based on this, now we don't need 8 images, we only need 6 images. We can calculate that kind of cost saving for the business, and without it, reducing our revenue for the site as well. So that's probably the most surprising and amazing test that we had that we got the answers for, sort of thing. So for next year, the kind of budget for the kind of photo shoot will be a bit lower because we've used these learnings from A/B testing. So yeah, that's probably the greatest thing that we know. Really, we've had some really great answers from that sort of thing. But I think additionally too, I think even the kind of more conversion driving ones, such as the either countdown timer or adding e-gift cards to PDPs as well, that's quite compelling. Great for of course for the peak period too, where obviously when it gets to more kind of close to Christmas, the delivery thresholds, they start to get more tighter. So obviously it's called gift cards from there, sort of thing. But I think with all the learnings that we've had this year, we kind of I think we feel a lot more prepared for of course Christmas and peak now. So yeah,
that's very interesting about e-gift cards. One to note, I think. Jo, what about you? Anything that's stood out lately that was a surprise? Or
so this year we've been testing badging on PLP. So we tested badging bestsellers, low stock products, and new in products. There were definitely a few hurdles in the testing process, which ranged from debates over styling and whether the calling out these messages was on brand, and also over the qualifiers of when these badges should show. So we worked collaboratively across all the different teams, creative, marketing, online merch, to make sure that the styling was in line with our new design system, and to make sure that it aligned with our brand values. Recently, we have actually just rolled out 2 of those badges onto site, which was low stock and new in. So those were the 2 that we saw the biggest conversions uplifts. Bestsellers didn't really do anything for us as a brand, which was quite interesting to see, and we might do some future tests around that. But yeah, both are live on site, both the creative team and brand team and online merch team are all very happy with how they look. So yeah, that was a bit of both, a bit of a healthy debate and also a shocker for us.
Thank you, Jo. There's a question here that I we want to put to John around both Matt and Joe have shared some really interesting nuggets there, like new in, low stock, avoid bestseller, e-gift cards, etc. But I guess this is the point of testing, is that not everything is the same for everybody. And if it was, everyone's website would look the same. So could you tell us a bit about that and how you, you find what's right for you and your brand and your customer?
Yeah, I think in a way, I think this question leads back to the earlier question you asked, both Joe and Matt, which is about brand. So, sometimes it's kind of interesting to when I speak to customers, just to find out what is it that they're trying to say with their website, and who are they trying to speak to, and it can be different for different types of companies, and that's even within e-commerce, and so. Yeah, I mean, there's where if you're putting a countdown clock on a product, that might work with a certain type of product, but it's not necessarily going to work if you're selling an extremely expensive holiday, for example. It's absolutely different depending on what your brand is and what you're trying to say. So I think testing shows you those answers. I think there's always going to be debate, but the idea is then within a company, is this right? Is this on brand for us or not? And as Joe said, putting a bestseller badge on a bestseller didn't necessarily make any difference, but they know that now. And so the other thing that I like to think is that, again, experimentation informs brand identity after a while. And it helps you hone, and it helps you get better, and it helps you fail better, and it helps you make better choices.
Very interesting. Thank you, John. We've talked about, we called them hotspots, these different homepage, PDP, PLP, search we briefly got to. Somebody has asked, how do you decide what takes priority? And I'll add to that, are there any other areas that maybe we didn't cover? You just need to name them, not necessarily go into them, that people should always look at. So homepage, PDP, PLP, are there any others that if you're making a list, that should be on that list? Joe, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Data helps us a lot to discover what our priorities are. So if we see a pain point on site, if we have multiple pain points on site, we'll see which is having the biggest impact and then go for that one first. In terms of other areas, before I actually joined the business, Russell Bromley started a project to revamp the checkout, and the team worked on a redesign, and it increased our funnel completion rate by a massive 30% by making those changes. So yeah, I would say your checkout is a very key area. I know Matt mentioned that earlier on as well. But yeah, for us, that's made a massive improvement year on year.
Perfect. Matt, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to talk about checkout testing, but maybe quite a few people who are viewing, we do use Shopify, which doesn't allow you to make a great deal of changes to your checkout. It's very locked down, even for a Plus customer. But I mean, in the past with other businesses as well, we have done like a checkout testing where we went from the old multi-page checkout from where it goes, okay, your basket, delivery, payment, and of course, order completion. And whilst nowadays it's always kind of like going towards the kind of single page. So I mean, we had kind of no choice but to go ahead with a single page. So we did some kind of tests on it with different websites and how the kind of gradual conversion rate or the kind of complete funnel completion improved over time. But it's quite tricky when you're not using like an A/B testing tool, because there's different aspects of of different months or weeks where for some reason you might have changed some budget in your Google ads, and of course next minute you got quite a bit of traffic going to your site, sort of thing. So it's going to skew your test. So it's a shame that I can't go more into testing on checkout sort of because of the Shopify restrictions. But I think ultimately what I've seen over time again is that of course the single page application is always going to be the kind of clear winner It's what people expect. And, you know, I'm not surprised where, you know, when you start checkout nowadays, people like to either click on Apple Pay or Google Pay, and it just completes everything for you. Or alternatively, it's just one or two taps, and it's autofilling on your iPhone, and it all kind of pre-saves your information. And of course, you should check out as well. So I think the whole kind of, you know, the old multi-page checkout is going away, and then of course, your single-page applications is just a lot more, you know, free-flowing and more nice for the customer or person. So
Thank you, Matt.
no problem.
John, do you want to try and answer how to prioritize any others as well as checkout, and kind of, you know, we're drawing to a close to sum up today's conversation?
Sure. I mean, obviously, I think I mentioned at the beginning, checkout's a big one. Absolutely, 100% agree here with what everybody said. And I will agree with Joe and say that actually the best place you can work out where to test is to kind of have a look at the data, and that could be whatever you're using, whether that's GA4. Matt mentioned Content Square, who are a partner of ours that we work very closely with, which is going to show you data, is going to show you how people are behaving, it's going to show you where people are dropping off, going to show you where people leave. And again, like with all data, you can see the data sometimes and you can go, but why are they dropping off? But why is that not converting? But why? And that's so just as A/B Tasty itself gives you data back from the experimentation that you've done and you learn, I would always say the place to start is from data, is where you can see that things are going, traffic is going, conversion is going, people are dropping off that customer journey. That's where you start experimenting first.
Right. Thank you, John. Unfortunately, we are over time. Actually, we're not running out, we are over. I feel like we could have kept going all afternoon. There were actually quite a few questions about checkout, so maybe we'll circle back to them another time. Thank you, Joe, Matt, and John. Thank you to our partner, A/B Tasty, and thank you all for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.